Hi, I'm here in Elephant and Castle, about a mile north of where I live, here in London. And I wanted to make a little history video just before this election happens, because in the last few weeks we've heard a lot about the people who have been left behind in the towns who have been left behind, and lots about the threat of Jeremy Corbyn taking us back to the 1970s. So I thought I'd talk a little bit about what it's like living here in London, which is apparently not so much of a left behind place. So I'll start back in 1974. Now, where I'm standing in 1974, there was a newly built estate with 1,800 council flats on it. And over the road was the main building of the Confederation of Shipbuilders and Engineering Unions, which is over here. Perhaps it doesn't look much like a union building anymore. Now, 10 years ago, when the Tories came to power, the estate that was here was in a situation of managed decline. The council didn't have enough money and wasn't willing to put the money in to repair it. And so instead what they did is they let it get run down, knocked it down and sold the land off to private developers. And what we have here now is a whole load of fancy flats, or at least they're supposed to be fancy, but they're kind of shit, that no one actually lives in, no one wants to live in. But they're worth a lot of money in terms of speculation on property prices. The 1,800 flats that were here, all the people in them got moved out far into Zone 6 of London, or if they wanted to keep a council flat the same size with as many bedrooms as they had, often they were told that they had to go to other cities. As they were demolishing the estate, there was a sort of suspicious fire in this building here, which was what used to be a little museum and have the local library. And the council hasn't put that back. They opened a little library, very cold and uncomfortable, in some shipping containers just round the corner for a while, but that's also gone now. So there ain't nowhere where you can go and read. But also in 1974, there was some stuff going on in the country, like more widely. The oil crisis had just hit, and there were workers in the aerospace industry who were mainly involved in building planes for military contracts in factories owned by Lucas. And right at that time that this estate was built, they realised that their jobs were at risk because of the rise in the price of oil. And so they came up with this plan, which was to take their factory that was making weapons, and they would stop making weapons, and instead they would make socially useful goods, things that could be used by everyone. Now, their plan never came to fruition for one reason or another. They kind of got shafted by their union in the end, or shafted by the right wing of the Labour Party. But what they did come up with were a load of amazing green technologies, hybrid fuel cells for cars, wind power, that, you know, if the British state at the time had invested in, they could have made a fortune and could have been a world leader. We could have averted something of the climate catastrophe in which we find ourselves. But 10 years ago, that building that was their union over the road, that was a squat, and some of my friends lived there. And I guess in 2012, squatting became illegal, and so all those people who were homeless who were living there had some shelter, got moved out, became very difficult to squat in the area, so people ended up sleeping rough. And so all of this stuff was happening under the first years of the Tories. This whole complex of like enormous fancy bullshit flats was built. There's even more up there. this tall one, the ugly one, which has the turbines at the top, which don't actually work. They got switched off as soon as the thing was made, because apparently they made too much noise for the people who had bought the very expensive penthouse suite. And so that building, which was meant to be a green building, is not a green building at all. It's just some kind of monument to socially cleansing. At the same time, like, this area has had like several waves of immigration. There's a large Ecuadorian and Colombian community here who have been moved out. There was a West African community that is like increasingly being moved out of the area as the council estates get knocked down. There's another council estate about like a half a mile, quarter of a mile down the road. It's also being demolished, redeveloped for housing speculation. And in the middle of it, the old Union building, where those workers came up with their green technology so long ago, well, that's now a pub. And it's a pub called the Manor. So, in the middle of gentrification, we have a gentry-themed pub. The same people who own that pub, about a mile and a half up the road in Deptford, own a job centre themed pub for your local hipsters taking the piss out of the unemployed. So, you know, we can talk about the places that have been left behind, but also, you know, all of the so-called progress that we've had here in London has not been so good either, but at least not so good for normal people who are trying to get on with our lives here. I really hope that we can find another way of doing these things, and I've got a lot of hope that, you know, perhaps Labour really can take us back to the 1970s, that we can have brand new estates of social housing for all kinds of communities with many languages spoken. We can have kids playing and not this like fucking soulless shit, which is all just like, you know, looks like public space but actually is private land, highly securitized because everyone wants to you know, keep hold of the equity they've invested in these shit flats that no one actually lives in. You know, so bring back some public space to the people. Perhaps we can have a green industrial revolution where we start, instead of making like all the rubbish we have in the world, some socially useful products. Perhaps we might become world leaders in green technologies again, and we can shut down that fucking pub. So, like, if you want that, if you want to go back to, if not the 70s themselves, at least their utopian dreams, then you can vote for the Labour Party on Thursday. I encourage you all to do that.